it's a fact of the matter dispute now, JJ, of the degree to which, I don't even know what you call it, there's deep-rooted institutional corruption. Did you read the letter the FBI sent Martin Luther King?
Yeah, but Paul, how much longer?
Don't roll your eyes at me. Did you read the letter?
The letter began by calling Dr. King a fraud and warned that the demise of his reputation among the public was fast approaching. The package also contained an audio tape, a compilation of FBI surveillance allegedly of King engaging in multiple extramarital affairs. The document's ominous closing, according to some scholars, suggested that Dr. King was given a deadline of 34 days to take his own life or suffer the humiliation of the tape's release.
But Paul, this is like 70 years ago. I think we can adjust.
And who was held to account for it? We had the Church and Pike committees. Who the was held to account?
I don't know.
Alan Dulles was on the Warren. See, this is my point.
But everybody who's even remotely associated with this are dead, right? Like, it's sort of like if you're sort of saying like, like at what point do we accept the fact that sort of the system has changed and that society has marched on, right?
Because cultural norms persist independent of the individuals in the institution. That's why that's why institutions that have been around for hundreds of years have maintained their culture. Like the New York Times or the monarchy in England or whatever. It's like, or company cultures. It's like cultures are passed throughout individual, unless there's a clean house. Well, the type of people who are willing to tell Martin Luther King to kill himself, which, just to be clear, you agree that is what happened, right? You know, you don't dispute that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, yeah, of course. But this is my point. It's like, and this goes back to like Dr. K and Destiny's thing of like, you seem to have the same problem where, why is your first instinct not to validate the conspiracy theorists' feelings who come across that? They're like, man, I just found out that the FBI basically told Martin Luther King to kill himself.
But it's like, what?
They absolutely killed Fred Hampton intentionally with COINTELPRO. That's not disputed. Then you have Operation Northwoods, where the Joint Chief of Staffs all signed on plans to kill U.S. civilians.
But
now you say, look, JJ, even if it is the case that we've held those people to account and that there's no reason to believe that that's consistent anymore, which is bullshit, but whatever. Let's just say that's the case.
Yes.
You understand how the average person would see those facts, or let's say come across those facts from their kook algorithms now that we're all victim to. My first instinct is to validate those facts rather than clamp down on it. And I do not understand the impulse to do otherwise that you, Destiny, all your establishment shill fans, have that are going to comment, shit that I don't even read on here because I ban all negative comments that disagree with me. And I just don't understand that.
Well, it's like, what does it mean to sort of validate those beliefs, right? Like, I mean, it's fine to validate things on a factual matter, to sort of say like, yes, this happened or it didn't happen. But the fact is, that's not what you're interested in. You're interested in drawing sweeping conclusions from the existence of these
What's
facts.
My sweeping conclusion that I think we should...
That we need to always sort of keep one eye open when we're sleeping because, the nasty FBI could do the same thing.
We should be skeptical and keep one eye open at all times.
But, this seems pretty preposterous, right? Because you're also like an opponent of the woke and all of that, right? So it's like, for example, like if I'm a gay
I am woke now, apparently.
Well, okay, so it's like I'm like a gay man, right? And so it's like, as you might have heard, and at one time being gay was a
mental illness.
Well, it was not only a mental illness; it was like a felony. Like you could go to prison.
Oh yeah, sure.
In my lifetime, over there in Texas, until literally Lawrence v. Texas, I could go to prison for engaging in sodomy, right? So does that mean that when I go to Texas today, I should sort of be in a heightened state of nervousness and apprehension because, like, you never know. Like, I could be thrown in prison tomorrow, right? That this could just immediately reverse and, back to jail.
No, but you'd be a fool to pretend that ethos is still not present to some degree in Texas, in conservative rural America, which, by the way, JJ, it is.
Yeah.
I don't hang around there that often, but I can tell you that that's certainly the case.
No, but it would also be preposterous for me to not have moved on, to not have accepted the many ways in which Texas is obviously a very different society now than it was, a half century ago.
Yeah, this is why I'm not an anarcho like anarchist. We need to abolish all government entities or whatnot. It's like we need an FBI. Do we need the level of bureaucracy that they have? No, the FBI is a useful federal agency to deal with interstate crime, and federal agents in the field can go to local police departments and assist them with like catching murderers and rapists. Good, we need that. Anyone who goes too far and says, well, nope, the entire thing, burn it all down, that's nonsense. That's not what I believe. No. And I will say, perhaps it is incumbent upon me to draw that line clearer against the people who go too far. Because, like, for example, Eric Weinstein, one of my favorite quotes by him is, it's not that the elite in and of itself are bad. It's that the current people in the elite are incompetent and need to be replaced by a better elite. Like, Tristan Harris, the guy who did The Social Dilemma, that documentary about the social network. Wouldn't it be so great if he had some position of power when it came to regulating social media and algorithms and stuff like that? Like, that's such a no-brainer in my mind. Or Daniel Schmachtenberger is another individual. It's like, that's a very non-conspiratorial, moderate attitude to have of like, we just need better people in there, right? We need, see, I could undermine myself by now continuing the irony and say, well, we need RFK Jr. in there, right? To clean all the shit up.
Secretary of Defense and Kash Patel running the FBI and all these kinds of people.
I'll have to watch those hearings to get a better idea.
This is not an irrelevant sort of part, right? Is because that if we rely too heavily on the conspiracy theorists to inform our understanding of institutions, then we logically conclude that the conspiracy theorist is the most rational person to be placed in charge of them, right? And that's how you wind up with...
Maybe else it depends what you mean by conspiracy theorists, because there's different... Like, people who say the earth is flat, I'm not putting in the same category as people who recognize the deep-seated corruption within the pharmaceutical industrial complex.
It's sort of like here's sort of like the evolutionary chart of how these kinds of things go. I feel like with people like you, right, is like you find a crime in the past, you very fixate on it, and you sort of say, this is like the purest essence of what that thing is all about, right? So it's like the FBI, like some agent sending a letter to FBI to Martin Luther King to kill himself. Like, that is the purest essence of what the FBI is.
No, but it's a red flag.
No, I think you present it as that's you obviously.
No, I just told you I don't believe the FBI is purely evil, and we need an FBI.
No. I mean, obviously, it can be not purely evil, but you can kind of make the argument that we see the truest glimpse of its inner soul when we see the worst manifestation.
We see a red flag. Like, if I'm on a date with someone, and she says, all these black people around here, I'd be like, that's a red flag. Can I like? That might be disqualifying immediately, but like, if I can, it's like a better analogy. Then be on guard for the rest of the time you're interacting with this person.
A better analogy would be like, like say she gets cut off in traffic or something, and she's like, "Oh, stupid black guy," or something like that, right? And you sort of say like, okay, is that like a glimpse into her deepest soul? Or is that just kind of like something that she said in a moment of weakness and vulnerability that is perhaps not reflective of, her?
Yeah, and maybe she comes from a racist household and that's just how she grew up.
Or maybe she was just in a point where she said something thoughtless because she kind of, was not thinking straight, right? Like, there are times when which you can look at sort of instances of people behaving poorly and not conclude that this is a glimpse of the food, right?
The FBI letter to Martin Luther King is one of several / many red flags, also including up until more recently. This isn't like 70 years ago in the past, the Garland shooter, which I also brought up on that podcast.
Yeah, that was pretty
Huh?
Hold on, which one are you talking about?
The one where the FBI informant encouraged a Muslim shooter to go to Garland, Texas, and shoot up the place. The quote that the FBI said to the guy was, "You should go." The quote was, "Go tear up Texas." So they're still doing that shit.
Okay, well, I'm less familiar with that.
Well, maybe story. JJ, if you were as brilliantly educated as you are about policy when it comes to tariffs, you were about the corruption of the deep state, I think you'd be in a much better position than you are.
This was the point I was trying to make, right? It's like when you sort of fixate on these like very sort of scandalous sort of episodes, and then you sort of draw the conclusion that this is again like the most representative sample, and that sort of creates a default disposition of paranoia. And then as a result, it becomes natural and logical to elevate and celebrate the most paranoid amongst us as being somehow the most sort of clear thinking. And then you wind up putting like deeply unqualified people in positions of power whose only qualification is that they are paranoid and conspiratorial minded.
Sure. That would be bad.
And that becomes dangerous, right? Because then you start getting into the idea where those type of people, the Kash Patel type of people, have this like, you know, adversarial relationship to other Americans, where their dreams are just dreams of sort of vindictive punishment, and because like they've already sort of created a moral universe in which these people are undeserving of anything beyond, you know, retaliation.
Yeah. You are pointing out a real danger, but I would say this is the same danger of saying like, well, you know, on the left, if you start talking about or you know, if you start talking about saving the environment constantly and just constantly referring to big oil as this utterly destructive entity all the time, you know, then eventually you can get to like eco-fascism and eco-terrorism.
And people on the right say that all the time. I mean,
yeah, and I would say, yes, and I would say, correct. That is a valid slippery slope. You're pointing out the reality of a slippery slope, but pointing out the existence of a slippery slope does not then therefore say that invalidates the, you know, the reasonable middle ground that you need to get to in between, which is that, yeah, the environment is being destroyed by a lot of these companies, and there is a lot of corruption in the permanent state that should be addressed. And it is pretty deep rooted. And it's probably, in my opinion, the right attitude now is to probably take a more adversarial approach than normal in order to get at that deep rooted corruption. I'll give you the last word on this.
I just think that we have to sort of look at sort of the landscape of modern America and modern American politics and sort of think, who is on the ascendancy right now in terms of power and in terms of influence? And what sort of conditions have led to those sorts of people rising to power? And if we agree that these kinds of people are problematic, I mean, perhaps maybe you don't think that Kash Patel and Pete Hegseth and
I don't know enough about Kash Patel
and JFK or RFK Jr., perhaps you don't think that these people being in positions of power is problematic. But if you do, and I think that most clear thinking people would, you know, it's important to sort of like think like, well, what sort of cultural ecosystem has made their rise possible?
Sure.
And then I think we kind of do have to sort of like take a critical look at whether or not there are aspects of our culture that have maybe gotten a little out of hand and need to be reined in a bit.
Yeah.
And I would just sort of say that I do think this deeply, deeply conspiratorial, distrustful, paranoid, you know, just overzealous attitude towards the sort of sinister motivations of elites is something that I think has metastasized into something pretty terrifying. And like, again, like this is not to like, you know, I will concede, Paul, obviously we have to hold powerful people accountable. We have to hold institutions accountable, but you know, too much of anything can be bad. And I think that we're starting to see the, where you can wind up if you've just kind of.
I love how you view that as a concession. Look, I will make the concession that we should hold the permanent state accountable for its corruption. It's like, okay.
You should be grateful for that much out of me.
My one sentence rejoinder, not even rejoinder, but just observation. Well, you can get the last word after this, is remember that by definition, reactionaries are reacting to something. And what you just said about what are the conditions in the culture that allowed someone like RFK to get into power. And I have my problems with RFK. Well, maybe if the regulators had done their job properly up front about getting rid of the genuinely bad shit in our food that should not have been there, that we shouldn't need in RFK to get rid of, it should have just been gone, and you wouldn't have someone like RFK.
Well, it just depends as to whether or not, when we're drawing these conclusions, we are doing so in a good faith, fact-gathering way.
Fine, we agree on that.
Or if we are just trying to validate pre-existing conclusions that we've reached based on, you know, beliefs that we formed, you know, when we were 15.
Nobody loves not blindly validating pre-existing conclusions more than I do.
That's great.